Welcome, movie lovers, to In Love with Movies.
I'm Danny.
And I'm Nick. And what do we do here on this podcast, Danny?
We talk about movies and love.
Love, yes, various love topics, often with a guest. And often the love topic is about the first half of the entire episode. But this month, we're doing something a little special, aren't we, Danny?
Well, a little special. There's a lot going on this month.
That's right. So this will be released the month of March.
Dun, dun, dun.
And the reason we're doing a special episode this month is because we did a bunch of batched episodes so that Danny can give birth to our first child.
I was also going to say the dun, dun, dun. Yeah.
Some of us are excited about that. Some of us are nervous about that.
Some of us don't have to push a child out their vagine.
Some of our listeners really don't like us when we talk about this stuff so much. So if you do actually enjoy the baby talk, let us know. We'd like to hear that too.
The baby talk? You took a put your baby.
But we had a special opportunity with former guest on our podcast and someone I have guested with several times. And we got to cover a movie that we've been probably wanting to cover for this episode, or for our podcast anyway. And he was looking to cover it for his. So Perry Constantine of the Superheroes Cinephile podcast let us do a little bit of a crossover. And so we have in our feed what will be about within a week. I can't remember if his comes out first or ours comes out first, but within a week of his show featuring us on his feed, we have the exact same episode releasing here on our feed. And it works out really well for us because it happens in the month of March where we will have a kid that is like 2 weeks old. So,
But also, do you know what the month of March is?
What is it, Danny?
The month of my birthday, also.
Well, yes, that's not what...
I'm just kidding. It's Women's History Month.
Exactly.
So it's perfect time to release the pod on Wonderwoman.
That's right.
Which actually, spoiler alert, is fantastic.
That movie still holds up. I know it's like not as old as some of the others, but we've covered some movies that... Well, we covered some movies that were brand new and were not great and did not hold up.
Yeah, it slaps.
But Wonder Woman's awesome. Yeah.
It does.
And you are being a Wonder Woman this month, and that's part of why we thought it would fit in with Women's Month, and we thought it would fit in with the history of Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
So, but I figured we would do a very brief, just a few minutes recording, so that maybe sometime after, we have a couple of other episodes that will be banked, such that, we may not necessarily be returning in April with child and, being here so quickly back. But sometime after we've got all of our batched episodes out, I thought we could return to some of the same things that we could talk about here today and see how they were. And some of those things I'm curious to see what your thoughts are at this stage. We're about, at the time of this recording, 1 week away, I think 9 days exactly from when our due date is. 8
days.
8 days,
Yeah.
okay. 8 days exactly. All right, so 8 days away from the due date. So 9 days from now, we're probably going to have a kid in our hands. And I'm curious, at this stage, let's hear a little bit more about what you're feeling about it. And then I want to, in the future, revisit and maybe ask some of these same questions back to you about like, hey, how did that go? How are your feelings validated? Or were you proven wrong about some of your fears and anxieties? So let's start with, what's the thing you are most excited about to have a kid?
Honestly.
Not being tired like this, that's one thing.
One thing is I'm very excited to have my body back.
That's
I've been
fair.
feeling like a whole different human. I think I'm very excited to have like a little companion. I'm going to dress him up real cute. We already got some cute ass outfits and bring him to things like yoga class and on my walks and yeah, and then the rest of the time, I'm excited for you to take care of him.
I'm excited to not be leaning over like this to record our podcast anymore.
Because
to
I'm
have
sitting
you
on
at
a
a
ball.
normal height and a normal chair.
Bruh, my hips. Bruh.
I get why. I'm just saying, hey, that's something I'm excited for. I'm not excited for all the other things. I'm curious. Let's follow up with that same train of thought. So you're excited about those things. I
And
love
sushi.
that. Sushi. Okay. So is that, you think that's going to be your first meal post-kid?
Yes.
Okay.
1000%.
Well, that's one thing I'm like, we'll see. Was that really your first meal?
Okay, we'll see.
Post-kid. That's
We'll
one thing to
see.
look into. What do you think your first alcoholic beverage will be post-kid?
Okay, I've been thinking about this a lot. I love margaritas, but if I want sushi, I don't think I should have margaritas plus sushi.
Why not?
That's true. I think just really want a glass of wine.
Okay, glass of wine.
Yeah.
Just a typical glass of wine. Red or white?
Red.
Red wine. All right. Movie lovers, hold us to it. Sometime after, we'll figure out what was her first alcohol after little baby Smaldwin was born. So, okay. So that's some things. Now, you mentioned in there, you can't wait to have your body back. Mm-hmm. I completely understand that. Let's see. What do you think? If you were a person in Vegas making betting odds, so the over or under.
Is there a baby pool actually happening and I don't know about it, and now you're like setting them up for these answers?
No. No, that's not what's happening. The reason there's the hesitation is it literally is in the last 2 days. The guys were like, hey, what day do you think? Or how many pounds? We could do a whole baby pool. And I was like, you guys can do a baby pool. I'm down for that.
Great.
But back to the question.
Yeah.
Okay. Over under. What I want is over under of what do you think, how long it'll take you before you feel like your quote end quote body is back?
6 weeks.
6 weeks. Mm-hmm. 6 weeks is the over under. All right. So that means that we have to wait until 6 weeks after the kid is born before we can come back to these questions at minimum, because then we'll be able to see is it over under.
Cool.
Okay. 6 weeks. I like that. All right. Since we're on baby pool ideas, over under. How many pounds, how many ounces do you think he's going to weigh?
Bro, I think this guy's going to be close to 8.
Yeah? Close to 8 pounds?
Yeah.
So like 7 pounds.
13 ounces.
7 pounds, 13 ounces.
Which, okay, I want to put this out there. I don't want to manifest that because I don't want that. Like, give me a 6'5" baby. That's great. Like, but we know his head is in the 90th percentile, so
yeah, that's been consistently.
I'm kind of screwed either way.
Every ultrasound measurement has put his head as being somewhere between 85 to 93 percentile. So it's gonna be a big head. It's okay. Like, it's malleable. It's squirt. It'll, like, be cone head and fit through however it needs to fit through.
I blame you. You have a big head.
I'm sorry. I'll take the blame for that one.
Good.
What are you most nervous about for childbirth?
Do any women listen to this podcast?
I think so.
Okay. The pain?
Okay.
I guess just like literally I've read things online and on the Facebook mom groups I'm in where some women are like, it's the most worst thing in the entire world. Oh my God, my vagina split from my butthole. And then everyone else is like, oh, it's like taking a big dump. So I truly have no idea.
I'm rooting for it to be more like big dump for you.
Me too. I just don't know what I'm going to feel,
That's fair.
I'm terrified.
Fair. Okay. So it's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah, but that's how I live my life. So.
Exactly. That's where I'm like, I don't know how that's different. What is the thing that I have done or said that has upset you the most during pregnancy?
We talked about this at breakfast.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, Nick told someone I gained over 70 pounds, which is not true. I gained 30 pounds, which is like normal amount of weight. Not like it matters. If I'm growing a human, it doesn't matter. But he just so matter-of-factly was telling people how much weight I gained. I was like, the fuck you talking about, boy?
Uh-huh.
And then you said that to our neighbor, and she goes, how much weight did you gain, Nick? And I was like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Put him in his place.
Shout out to Hannah. She put me in my place pretty quick. I have made many faux pas like that, ladies and gentlemen.
Nick also does like to say, it was cute for a while, but I think I'm getting over it, that we are pregnant. And we are both expecting a child, but not both of us are pregnant.
That's fair. And for a long time, you said it didn't bother you. And so even it didn't bother you. Like, it's not like I said it with like all sincerity. It's just like, it's the easy way to phrase it. And I usually catch myself. But now you're saying even when I catch myself, it's something that's annoying you.
Yeah, sometimes Nick is like, oh, also my back hurts. Also my tummy hurts. I'm like, oh, yeah? Oh, yeah?
Okay, that's also something that, like, you have said it's funny and it's cute.
You
that
know
I am
what?
having sympathy pregnancy
We're
symptoms
too close to the end for anything to be cute right now.
And that's fair. That's fair. So I would like listeners who maybe have not had kids yet understand, especially for the guys out there, be patient. Be understanding, because trust us, she's being very patient and understanding with everything you're saying as well. Mm-hmm. And it's okay that the marker moves, because you know what? How she feels at week 22 is not going to be how she feels at week 38. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. You just got to talk through that stuff. So how did we get through those terrible faux pas on my part? What would you recommend if anybody's listening who's thinking about having kids in the future? What should they do to make sure that they don't get divorced as a result of having a kid?
I think this is the same thing I say all the time about us anyways. Nick can't read my mind. And there was a shift in, like, me being like, I'm okay with this, to immediately, I'm not okay with this. But I didn't tell him that there was a shift. I just got mad about it, so.
And in your defense, I don't know that you were immediately aware of the shift.
Yeah, I think this process is one of the hardest, wildest, craziest things I've ever done. And you don't know what it's going to be like, and so just trying to be more introspective. What did you say yesterday? You're like, you have no inner locus of control.
Internal locus of control.
Oh, yes. Internal. Because I like to blame the outside.
Yep. That is
or
external.
Or fear
locus
the
of
outside,
control.
basically.
You're afraid of it. You give it credit for it. Basically, it's a not good or bad. You just feel like things happen to you because you do them. Internal locus. Things happen to you because the world exists that way. External locus.
But I need to be more introspective and realize that women's bodies were literally made to do this, first of all. Second of all, we are way stronger than we think, and we're pretty much badass. And it's shocking. Do I say it in this podcast? It's shocking to me that women don't run the world. We do, but, like, you know, if you Google world leaders, it's the dumb old white men.
Yeah, but that is... Well, I was about to say that's mostly true in this country, but it's mostly true in a lot of places. It is more true in this country, I think, than it is in some others, but yeah.
Which is wacky, because the things that we can do, I can throw up on myself and still go to work later that day. You're welcome.
So, one last question. Assuming that birth goes exactly as planned, what do you think would be the worst and the best part of birth? So, what do you anticipate, like, come 2 days after kid is born in our arms, and I ask you, what was the worst part? What do you think your answer will be? And then what was the best part? What do you think your answer will be?
Jeez. I think the worst part is going to be, like, waiting. You know, it can take anywhere from, like, 2 to 48 hours, so I don't know how my body's going to react. And that whole beginning part, it might take a long time. I think that's going to be awful, because it's going to be really painful. I think the best part is going to be, obviously, the baby at the end. But also just having gone through it, being like, okay, reconfirm, you're a bad bitch. Having our playlist on, and having you and both our doula just being there cheering me on.
Okay. I like that. And for listeners who are not familiar with the birthing process, we have elected to have a somewhat, or just a few days early induction. So that's another thing that can cause the quote-unquote whole labor process. The part where you're in the hospital can take a little bit longer. If you choose to do, let yourself start labor at home. A lot of people do sort of start labor, and then they have several hours at home where they're kind of doing their own thing. They're not in the hospital. It's, I don't know what that exact experience is, but I just know that it does not necessarily, that part doesn't always end up being 2 days. If you choose to start labor at home, you're probably not in the hospital for 2 days before you even have a kid. But when you induce, that's exactly what can happen pretty frequently. So,
I think it can go either way.
That may be true.
It's more controlled when you are inducing.
True, but I'm just saying I have had, I've learned a lot during this process, as I'm sure anyone will. But, if you're listening to this, you maybe it'll open your eyes to something as well, too. It's something we talk a lot about on this podcast, is the fact that we don't talk enough about everything. So.
Yeah, man, go educate yourselves.
Exactly.
Because we're reading a book right now that's like, we're getting to the end of the book, obviously. It's day by day of what to expect. And yesterday you looked at me, you go, dang, I'm so sorry. Because it was just talking about, like, the recovery of your body after having to grow this thing inside of you for technically 10 months.
Which is the part that I think people talk about the least, is the, like, what
The
happens to a
afterwards.
woman's body afterwards.
Yeah, and your emotions, and I think I'm hormonal now. Wait till they all drop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, that'll be fun. Super fun topic to start this podcast with.
Well, we are gonna make it pretty quick here. We're gonna get out of here because this is gonna be an extra long episode on the movie side of things because it is a full podcast that is usually just about movies, specifically superhero ones. But because Danny is busy being a Wonder Woman, we wanted to just touch base real quickly with you all and let you know that that's happening. We also wanted to give you a heads up that the remainder of this podcast will be purely in audio form. Because of the nature of way that things are recorded for SCP podcast. Just to let you all know, from this stage forward, you're just going to hear voices. You're not going to see us if you were watching this on YouTube or on Spotify. You will just see a blank screen of our background as opposed to seeing, our pretty little faces that we have for you right now. As Danny makes a weird face. So, any last words before we let things get over to the movie half, Danny?
Yeah, guys, wish me luck. Send all your energy, your manifestations, prayers, and food over to me. See you on the other side.
All right. And one thing I'm looking forward to on the other side is seeing how well this new thing that we've talked about a couple of times here on the podcast now, Magic Mind. So I've been drinking these Magic Mind productivity shots that are a blend of matcha and nootropics and different mushrooms and things of the like. That it's been giving me a whole lot of focus and helping out with my ability to work from home and really staying in the zone and paying close attention to all the spreadsheets and all the deep cut reading that I get to do for my job. It gives me the ability to stick to it longer. So I strongly recommend our listeners to go ahead and give it a try. This is, again, Magic Mind is the name of the company. They are sponsoring these few episodes with us. So if you go to their website, magicmind.com, you can use code MOVIES20. That's magicmind.com, and then on your first order, use movies20. That code will get you 20% off, and we have additional extra special for just the month of March deals that are happening for you, and you can only get those deals by visiting the link in our description for this episode. So go ahead and check out the description of this episode, use the promo code MOVIES20, and get yourself a little bit of Magic Mind, see how it works out for you, and then let me know how it works for you. And then I, by that time, will be able to tell you whether or not it has helped me to combat the absolute extreme loss of sleep that comes from being in the first few weeks of a kid's life. That's the thing I'm curious to see, is how well it works for that. But all right, with that, we hand you over to Perry Constantine and the Superhero Cinephiles podcast.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
In love with movies. Da-da-da.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and joining me again is Nick Baldwin, but it's a special episode because he brought a date today, and that is his wife, Danny. How you guys doing today?
Great.
We finally got her here.
We finally did it. We've been talking about this for a while.
3 times I've appeared, I've been like, maybe one day we'll get Danielle here.
Today's the day.
Today's the day. We finally got Danny on the show. Yes, very excited. Danny, I am so glad you are here because you don't know what your husband has put me through every time, almost every single time he comes on this show. He exposed me to duck boobs. He made me watch duck boobs.
Actually watched that too. He was watching the movie in our room while I was like, I don't know, decorating or something. And I remember like not wanting to pay attention to the movie. And I kept looking at the screen like, wait, what? It's
like a train wreck. You can't look away from Howard the Duck.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I'm so sorry he put you through that.
Yes. And so when he told me that you wanted to come on the show and you wanted to talk about Wonder Woman, I'm like, oh my God, we have to have Danny on all the time because she actually has good taste in movies.
Can we get like a clip that out? I want to put it in a button and then remind Nick that someone said that about me.
No, it's going to be on the soundboard for our podcast. And every time I talk about education, she's just going to press it and it's going to be like, Danny has good taste in movies.
I will make sure to edit that into its own specific MP3 file for you guys.
Appreciate it,
Perry. So Nick's been on the show before. We don't really care about his background. Everybody's heard from him before. As he often says every time he's on and he talks about the show you guys do, most people listen to it because of you anyway, Danny. So let's hear a little bit about you.
Great. Yes, I am the talent in this relationship.
Dang right.
Nick's behind the scenes. Yeah. I mean, what should I tell you? In my real life, I do education. That's kind of boring. But I love it. I am
As an educator, I agree.
Oh yeah. But my big things are, what do I like to do? I'm a fitness instructor. So I do that a lot. And also I'm a comedian. So I like to think I'm funny.
You're mostly funny.
I was waiting for that.
Definitely funny, yes.
Yeah. And so actually I wasn't a huge movie fan until I met Nick.
I don't know that you are yet still.
We've been together for 10 years now.
I mean, do you consider yourself a movie fan? We started this by you saying you don't like a lot of movies.
Yeah, I like what I like.
Okay.
And also, I guess, I don't know when this is coming out, but I'm currently very pregnant.
So it will be likely listeners are hearing this after we have a child.
So I have a child
now.
Yes, there you
go. Congratulations to you guys in the future. As a parent now, it's and I've told Nick this before after he told me that you guys were expecting. The newborn days are actually very nice. Aside from it's just you get a little bit sleep deprived, but it's pretty easy. You just feed them, you change them, you put them back to bed. It's when they start walking that it becomes a handful.
As we just saw 4 minutes ago, as your son started to run away.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for
and they get very loud at that point too.
I'm rooting for us to at least have the experience you had with newborns, because we have spoken to others who did not get blessed with the just easy feed them, boop them, and clean them and put them back together, put them back to bed. So I'm hoping that we get that. That's
your mom
my finger crossed.
Described babies as a poop tube the other day. That
Yep.
was her best advice. It was like, just poop tube. Things go in, things go out. That's it.
That's a very apt description.
Can't wait. Or if you're listening in real time, I'm loving this poop tube.
You guys also host the In Love with Movies podcast, and what you're saying about because I was listening to the episode you guys did on The Godfather, and my daughter now is obsessed with the Barbie movie, and there's that scene in the movie when they're trying to get all of the. You guys have seen it, right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's the scene in the movie when they're trying to distract all the Kens, and they go in and they talk about The Godfather, and they're like, "Oh my God, The Godfather! I've never seen it." And he's like, "You've never seen The Godfather?" And my wife looked at me when that scene happened and started laughing.
I think I did too.
Yeah,
because I had just watched The Godfather before that.
Yeah, it would have been very soon, around the time that Barbie was released, is when we probably recorded that episode.
I had never seen it before, but I have to tell you guys this: I love it. I get it. It's a great movie.
It is a great movie, but I definitely felt exposed with that scene in Barbie.
All men at that point were like, "Ooh,
yeah.
Oops, I've done that before."
So, here we talk about superhero movies, and Nick is obviously the superhero fan in relationship. But Danny, what is your history with superhero movies, if any?
Great question. I didn't watch a lot of superhero movies before I met Nick, and now it's a requirement to remain in the marriage to watch every bit of at least Marvel content that comes out.
That's not entirely true. I haven't made you watch all of the content. The major movies
we're getting real close.
I'm just saying, you have not seen all of the TV shows. I have let you duck out of them.
Okay, you're right.
Many of them.
You're right. 2 of them. Anyways, and I have grown to love being a nerd. I think through Nick, we're more into Star Wars. That's our nerdom. We have it tatted on us. We're in a room that is covered in Star Wars. Our child may or may not have a Star Wars-esque name, TBD. But when we were watching this movie last night, I looked to Nick and I said, I think this is my favorite superhero movie of all time. So I'm super excited that I get to talk about it, that we got to watch it. This is also the superhero movie I've seen the most out of any superhero movie. My top, if you have to ask me, Marvel, Ant-Man. What a guy. But of all superhero movies, it's Wonder Woman.
With the ageless Paul Rudd, and I'm convinced there's a decaying photograph in his attic somewhere.
You might be right.
I wouldn't like if that somehow came out as a secret, I'd be like, yeah, sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this movie too, but we'll get into that in just a minute. And my wife also has the same experience as you, Danny, because when I first started dating her, she said she didn't like superhero movies, so I made her watch Guardians of the Galaxy, and that got her into it. And then from there, she wanted to watch the second one, and then after that, I made her watch the Deadpool movies, and then after that, she was like, oh, okay, yeah, I like superhero movies now. So then I exposed her to, okay, good, we're going to watch the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe in order. Yeah. And somehow she married me, so.
Yeah, it's a lot, but I think the good thing about, like, at least these movies, I know Nick is very into comic books. I don't know if you read comic books.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I'm assuming. The movies, at least, the big guys, are accessible to all. So even if I don't know all the background of, like, the things, I know I can go into one of these superhero movies and get, for the most part, enjoyment out of it. Marvel's really been dropping the ball lately. Their past few movies, they've sucked.
Well, I was actually going to say, yeah, I think that's something that the first phases of Marvel and Wonder Woman did really well, whereas other movies in the DCEU did not do well, which is connect it, like, in these sort of, specific and intentional ways, but don't have the whole story hinge on anything happening outside of the movie that you're watching. Whereas first phase of Marvel and the second phase, like, basically most of the Infinity Saga, they were good at being like, you could watch just the Captain America movies and you would be able to track, like, that through line story. You know what I mean? You didn't have to watch all the other content. Now you do. And with Justice League and other things for DCEU, they were like, hey, Avengers was good. Let's just jump ahead to that. And it's like, I think both companies at this point have forgotten, like, the only reason those things worked is because you did really good, genuine character movies that made you care about these people, that you then put them through terrible things later. Like, you can't just leap to putting people through terrible things. You're like, I don't know who this person is. Why do I care if they're in a world-ending situation?
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, did you guys see the Marvels yet?
No.
Okay, so I think that just came out on Disney Plus, but I thought that was that was really enjoyable. Little bit tied into stuff that came before, like the Ms. Marvel show and WandaVision, but I think you can mostly watch it if you haven't seen those shows.
Well, we have seen both of those shows.
Yep.
Okay, so then you're fine then. Yeah.
And then I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but another big piece of this movie, that, like, why I picked this movie, is because this is the first time I had ever seen a woman be truly badass and not, like, hinged on another man on screen. And I remember being in the movie theater and crying. And I understand where people who are, like, underrepresented, of a certain, like, skin color or, background, they've never seen themselves on screen. This is the first time I saw a woman on screen that I was like, holy crap. This is it. I get it now. I get why people like superhero movies.
Yeah.
Was that scene that you cried at? Was that the No Man's Land sequence?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of women express that exact same sentiment, and
I'm, like, getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
Yeah, I saw that movie in the theater too, and when I got to that scene, I'm just like, oh my god, this is so cool. But I had no idea, like, how important that scene was to so many women, and it's been awesome hearing everybody talk about how much I think Kevin Smith's wife talked about it. He went to see it with his wife and his daughter, and they were both crying at that scene too. And he was talking to his wife about it later, and he was trying to understand, and she was just basically like, you don't get it.
Yeah, the feels right there. It must be what you guys like the first time you ever saw a superhero movie, like a Batman or a Superman.
Yeah. I think it's probably something that it's hard for us to identify with because we've just had it our whole lives and, like, take it for granted. You know what I mean? You
exactly,
may have some memory of it, but I think even that wouldn't have the same weight because we don't have a lifetime before it of not having seen ourselves represented.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure that moment would have been the first Superman movie for me, but I don't even have a memory of when I first watched that movie because it's been part of my life for so long.
Exactly, yeah.
And this is, like, not the first woman superhero I had ever seen on screen, but I think the other ones have been represented in, like, they can only accomplish so much with the help of a man or with the help of a team. And Wonder Woman, as we'll probably talk about, she don't need nobody. She is the God Killer.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that helps is, and sorry, we're just launching right into the movie, but I had written down, this I think was not just the first like female-led superhero movie, it was the first truly good female-led superhero movie. And I'll save some of the details until we get kind of there again for No Man's Land, but like there are elements of this movie as a true film. It's got its flaws, especially the ending that we'll get to. But like I think a lot of other things were like, oh, this is just fodder and trash and not like good film and not good music, not good emotional stakes, not doing a good job writing, acting. It's like all the things that make a movie like a really good movie. They hadn't really been bothered with. Whereas there's a ton of bad movies out there with dudes who are the leads, dudes who are superheroes who are the leads, but there's also really, truly good ones. And there kind of always have been for at least my lifetime.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right, so before we jump too much into the movie, what are you guys into lately? Is there anything that is really kind of grabbing your interest these days?
Yeah, we have obsessed over...
I knew this was going to come.
The Traitors. Have you watched The Traitors?
I haven't even heard of this. What is this?
Oh, okay. Well, there's different franchises of The Traitors. So I think it started in Australia.
Sounds like, yep.
And then went to UK and US at the same time. We started with US, and it is hosted by Alan Cumming. What a gem of a man. And the first season is they take 10 reality show stars and they take 10 normal people, and they determine that 3 people are traitors, and everyone gets murdered. Well, not everyone. One person at night gets murdered by the traitors. So then the remaining people have to try to figure out who the traitors are. So it's just a whole game of like deception and darkness, and
it's kind of like if you've heard of that like party game Werewolf, you know what I mean? We're like,
oh yeah, or Mafia or anything like that.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It is that turned into a prolonged reality TV show competition.
And then there's like challenges for money and stuff, and it's good. It's really hard to watch, honestly, because people are lying to each other's faces, but it's addicting.
It is. It is. We like watched the first season of America, discovered the others, binged the others, and then we're like, okay, we need to take a break before we go back to the second seasons of some of these things and just let them all get there so we can binge them anyhow, plus giving the opportunity for it to give us some distance.
Yeah, I was dreaming about lies and deception every night.
But it is very good, very fun.
Yeah.
So my daughter was just trying to climb all over me just now and steal my headphones at the same time. And now if you hear this moaning in the background, that's because my wife just dragged her away.
I wanted to be with Daddy.
She wants to be a podcaster, apparently.
One day.
If this show goes on long enough, maybe we'll start doing it with them.
Love that idea.
But yeah, you know what? I was trying to think of what I've been into lately. I have not had a chance to really get into anything these days, just because, you know, I'm winding down. The semester in Japan ends in just ended. So I've been winding down that, doing final stuff and doing grading and all that kind of stuff. And I've been working now with this publisher, so I've been doing a lot of work for them, and I've been in full on work mode lately. So I haven't had a chance to really kind of just do anything for fun. But I guess the closest thing, and Nick, you might be aware of this, but there was Mark Waid did a Brave and the Bold series back in the 90s, I think, with Barry Allen Flash and Hal Jordan Green Lantern.
No, I guess I thought for a second maybe I did, but no, I'm not familiar with this.
So I picked up the trade a while ago. It was on one of those Amazon sales, and just had a chance to finally sit down and read it. And it was really cool. It's like it was like a 6-issue series, and it's like each issue was set like in a different time period between like their actual comics. So it wasn't like changing anything. It was trying to find a way to fit these stories in with the other stuff that was already there. And it was pretty cool because I was never really clued into either of those characters, those versions of those characters. So it was cool to kind of see Mark Waid, who's a big fan of those characters, and kind of see like why he likes them and get kind of a better sense of who those guys are.
That's really cool. That's really neat. I've got a couple of things Mark Waid on my shelf that I have read, and others that I've like still got to list. Mark, I have yet to read something Mark Waid that I didn't enjoy, at least on.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely, yeah. All right, so that's a nice. So now we can just talk about Wonder Woman. We can table the comic discussion before Danny gets bored and leaves.
I was like, I don't know, Mark.
She started just like. I want to share, because of you and I's conversations on previous episodes, I have gone back and I have started. I watched all of the crossovers for the Arrowverse to get me to the last season of Arrow, and then I have watched the first episodes of the first season or the last season of Arrow. I literally was just starting Crisis on Infinite Earths today when our Netflix was having problems, so I ended up deciding to play video games instead. I am finally at that stage, and I have had the SCP episode classic in my feed, waiting until I finalize and finish that miniseries. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that was a that was a fun episode we did back in the days when Derek was still with us. I'd re-listened to that too when we did that, when we released it for the classic stuff as well. And yeah, that was that's where the Arrowverse should have just stopped, I think, after that crossover. But you still got to watch Superman and Lois though.
That is what comes next. Comes next. I decided I wanted to get through that portion, whatever I was going to watch of Arrowverse, and then I was just going to skip over to Superman and Lois without watching any of the rest of Arrowverse, since it is a sort of separate show.
Are these cartoons?
They are not. They are live action.
Oh.
Would you watch Superman and Lois with me? Ooh.
We'll see.
We're going to have a lot to watch in maternity leave, and you said only nice, feel-good stuff.
Yeah, but I haven't watched most of the Housewife franchises, so I kind of want to catch up. That's
Superman
my superheroes.
Yeah. I will say, though, Superman and Lois is so good. Even if you don't like the Arrowverse stuff, it is like this really well-done family drama, basically, just with Superman in it. So it's really quality TV.
All right, maybe I'll give it a shot, just because Perry said.
Yes! I brought you on the podcast. Let's talk about Wonder Woman.
All right, yes, let's talk about Wonder Woman. Now, Nick, I don't know about you, how familiar you were with Wonder Woman, the comics. I never really read any of her comics. You know, I've only been familiar with her like when she was in Justice League or when she pops up in other comic books. And just in general, like not only Wonder Woman, but mythology-based characters in general, I was just never really a fan of in the comics. So that even goes for Thor. I only got in this comics, after the movies. And but there's still like a ton of Thor stuff I haven't read. I still never really glammed on to like Hercules or any other mythological characters. They just never were. Greek myths, Norse, Roman myths, all that. It was just never really my thing. So I never really connected with her. I was more into the sci-fi superhero type stuff. How about you?
Yeah, it was never a comic that I had really read much of specifically. I'd seen her in other things. Probably, because when it comes to DC, I didn't even read a lot of Batman younger. I've read more Batman since I've gotten back into comics as an adult. But yeah, it's really mostly just been her overlapping at things. Although, in the last couple of weeks, I recently picked up the first issue reprint of George Perez's start of the Wonder Woman run. And that first issue was very interesting and enlightening to me to then watch the sort of origin story that they had chosen for this movie and where the similarities and differences lie there.
Do you think, this is just, woman brain. Do you think that Wonder Woman, as just like a solo character in her comics, is sold and read less than any other, like most of the other comic books? Because she is, and this is just like, when you're little and you're a little boy and you're like, I want to see a man, I want to read Batman, I want to read Superman. So it's interesting that both of you were introduced to her when she was with other characters and with other dudes instead of just seeking her out.
Yeah, I do think, I don't know the numbers. Perry, you might know better than me. I suspect she probably sells less than Superman and Batman, but she is a part of the sort of, trinity of DC for a reason. And I think she, depending upon what time period you're looking at, I bet she has competed with anyone other than those two. But I don't disagree with you that there's some truth to, what you're saying.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think one of the big reason that she is part of that trinity is because she was one of the first ones created. And I'm actually looking over sales history right now, and it was from what it says here, it was a lower tier sales book for DC in the 60s, but it was mid-range seller for the comic industry overall. And it improved a little bit with the Linda Carter series, but and then they tried to double up the frequency of it, but that ended up hurting sales. And then after the show got canceled, sales kind of trailed off a little bit again. And then when George Perez came on, when he did his reboot, that also improved sales a lot too. There was also this weird thing that I think it was Denny O'Neil did in like the 70s, where he was, and this is male brain thinking, which is what was happening here, was he thought like, he was very inspired. He was a very progressive minded guy, but ended up taking some of the wrong lessons from that. And when it came to Wonder Woman, he thought like, her costume was too sexist, right? The whole, either the mini skirt or the swimsuit style thing. So we decided to give her a full bodysuit, and he decided, I'm going to take away her powers and just make her like, a non-powered superhero. And there was this massive feminist backlash to that, actually, because they're like, we understand what you're trying to do, but you're taking the wrong lessons from it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're instead just depowering the most powerful woman in comics.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting.
So, so Danny, you're not a comic person, but were you familiar at all with like the Linda Carter series or any other Wonder Woman type stuff in growing up?
I don't really think so specifically. Like, I didn't know who Wonder Woman was, but I never really like went out of my way to be like, I'm gonna watch the TV show or whatever. But I think a lot of it comes from, this is gonna sound crazy, like when I was a teenager, when you think about like Halloween costumes and stuff, girls have few options. It's like sexy mouse, sexy cat. And so Wonder Woman was always an option. And I always just thought like, wow, on top of that being a sexy costume, this is just like a badass like woman and a badass, like she's just, it's a symbol of power. And I think also she represented, especially, am I making this up, around like 2016, the We Can Do It. We're bringing a lot of Wonder Women out, trying to fight against.
No, I think there was definitely some of that. Like there's I think, well before that been recreations of the Rosie the Riveter position
as
pose with Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
But yeah, she definitely fed into a lot of that feminism.
Yeah, I mean, I love woman. I'm always like, women power and like very into women and gender studies, and so like she just kind of always was one of those symbols. But I had never watched a movie or a TV show, or even read a comic book.
Yeah. How much do you guys know about her creation, actually?
So it was a psychologist kind of who created her. He was dating, he kind of had a polyamorous relationship with his graduate assistant and his wife.
Oh.
He is the guy who created the lie detector test, which is what the lasso of truth like represents.
Yes, yeah.
And supposedly, I think if I remember correctly, the original drawings Marston did are kind of like supposed to look like his wife.
How did you know this?
We've had this conversation, you and I. You just don't remember.
That's really cool.
I think I discovered most of that around the time that the movie came out, and there was a bunch of like history things. And if I'd known it before, I didn't like clock it, register it, it didn't stay in my brain. But being at a place where I also know that polygraphs are not really that reliable as much as we think they are and use them. It was also fascinating to me.
That's why they're inadmissible in court. Yeah. Also, like he was, especially for that time, for the 1940s, he was an outspoken feminist, polyamorous, like you said, and he believed that women were superior to men, and the whole idea behind Wonder Woman was that she would solve problems with not with fists, but with love and with bondage and submission. So there's lots of bondage in those early comics. Which, there's actually a movie.
Maybe.
There's actually a biographical film about him. I think it's called William Marston and the Wonder Women or something along those lines. I've never seen it, but it's like all about his life and his connection and his relationship with his wife and his assistant. So I am really curious to see that. But yeah, it's a really interesting story.
Yeah, I love that. Also, can I just say he was correct that women are superior, and I'm confirming that right now with. Sorry to the. I'm sure your audience is like 99% dudes, but like going through pregnancy, like the things that women have to do, and then are just expected to like keep on living. It's tough, and so I do understand. Like women are tough AF. Let me tell you, one day I was like driving to work, threw up on myself, and I was like, well, still gotta work later today. There's like a lot of things that, sorry, again, hi, all you guys out there. I don't know if you guys could handle this.
I think if our sex had been developed to be it, we would figure out a way. But if you waved a magic wand, we were talking about this on our podcast with someone recently. Like, it's very easy for me to say. And as much as I genuinely feel it, I would take this on for you if I could. I say that. I genuinely believe it right now. I still don't know how well I would take it if you could wave a magic wand. And tomorrow I was the one going through what you're going through.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
But,
I think there are two things that makes me think of. Did you guys ever watch Scrubs?
Yes.
Oh, Nick's a huge Scrubs fan.
Okay, so there's this one episode when JD was talking. It's like these little like montages of the hospital. And he's talking about how different people experience pain. And there was this husband and wife in the middle of childbirth, and the wife is like straining. She's like giving birth. And the husband's like, I got a hangnail. Can you ever think of anything more painful? And the wife's just looking at it, gives it like this like look of death. And the other thing I think of is one of George Carlin's stand-up specials when he's talking about if there is a God. He's like, I firmly believe it's a man because no woman could or would have fucked things up this much.
I like it.
Facts.
But anyway, Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, yeah. So Gal Gadot, cast as Wonder Woman, first appeared in Batman v Superman, which utter absolute train wreck of a movie. Danny, I'm not sure if Nick exposed you to that, but
I think I've seen it it's on in our house sometimes.
Yeah, I feel like you've walked through parts of it. I don't know if I've made you sit down
and I think I've said, oh, this looks like trash.
And you were right.
That's accurate.
And I can never remember if it's pronounced Gal Gadot or Gal Gadot.
I think it's
Either
Gadot,
of you know?
right?
I think Godot,
Okay.
but I'll be honest, I'm not. I'm no expert either.
Yeah. But I remember her from like the Fast and Furious movies, and like and she was one of the brighter spots in those movies, one of the better actors in it, obviously. And then, when she was cast as Wonder Woman, I'm like, okay, that's an interesting choice. I don't know why they're bringing her in Batman v Superman when they've already got so much other stuff going on in this movie. But she was like the brightest spot in that otherwise awful movie.
I completely agree. And I also feel like in this movie in particular, I had a note that it was like, she just truly embodies the character, the spirit of the character. I even think, for the most part, she still executed that in Wonder Woman 1984, which we will discuss as little as possible because of that, how that movie was. But like the character of Wonder Woman, the sort of innocence in the fish out of water scenes, the sort of genuine, like just sincerity with her wanting to be loving, and yet her, like, you believe her being a powerful badass. Like, she just really did hit it home, and I think has become the template the same way that Christopher Reeves had in terms of, what they should look like, how they should act, etc.
Yeah. She also, the actress in real life, was in the Israeli army, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And I do believe she was pregnant during shooting parts of this movie as well.
Really? Wow, I did not know that. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned her military history, because I remember when she was first cast, a lot of people are saying like, "Oh, why are they casting this skinny girl as Wonder Woman and all that?" I'm like, she was a fucking Israeli soldier. I mean, I'm firmly convinced she could kick any of those guys' asses in real life.
Yeah.
Did she do her own stunts? There were a couple times where I'm like, I think that was her.
I'm sure she did. I can't remember if she did all of them, for sure, but I would think that she probably did a lot of them because she's that type of person. I also think a big enough budget movie like this, there does reach this point where they're like, no, you can't. We won't let you.
Fair.
Yeah.
But for a lot.
I'm trying to look up, see what it says about stunt work. I imagine there's probably a lot of green screen, because especially like a lot of the superhero movies, especially the DC stuff, because most of this stuff was still during the Zack Snyder era, and he was very big into green screen. But yeah, you're right.
Now,
Here is something. She was pregnant during reshoots, and she was 5 months pregnant, and they put a green cloth over her stomach to edit out her pregnancy.
yep, I
That is
did know
just
that.
wild and amazing and awesome.
So is Themyscira a green screen? Was that a green screen landscape, or like where were they? Because that was beautiful. It's so beautiful and so realistic.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm trying to see if there's anything mentioned here in
I'm making you
Wikipedia.
do all your research.
Yes.
Right now.
I can tell that the scenes that were filmed on the beach during the attack were like a set of some kind. I could tell that, but I don't know, like, some of those, where her training scenes and things like that. I agree with you. They're just absolutely gorgeous. Or, of course, the establishing shots of the place. I don't know if that's like entirely green screen or if there actually is an island in Greece somewhere that just looks that awesome.
Okay, it was filmed on location. They finally settled on the Salentine coast, along the Tyrrhenian Sea, which is in southern Italy.
Okay.
Huh. Gorge.
Very gorgeous.
And they considered 47 different countries.
Wow.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, I think they did a good job, whoever picked that location, because it's gorge.
Yeah. Well, also, talking about this being, it wasn't the first female superhero movie. We've had other ones before, like Catwoman and Elektra, which probably the less said about those, the better.
Agreed.
But this was also the first one directed by a woman too, right? Patty Jenkins directed this one. She was actually, I think it may have been no. She wasn't the first superhero movie directed by a woman. I think that was Punisher Warzone.
Okay. But first female-led superhero movie directed by a woman, which I think says something. That there's that like female sensibility behind the camera.
Yeah, and I think she knows, like we talked about already a little bit, but she understands the woman's perspective and like the feelings of, let me create no man's land and have this be the most shocking, wonderful, moving scene there is. But even the beginning of the movie, I think we were like 5 minutes in. I was like, I love this movie. It's just, it really is so good. It's so well done. It's so believable. And the Amazonians or the Amazons? I don't know. Amazonians?
Both. I think either one works.
Both are okay.
They're all so beautiful, but in like a strong way. You're like, oh, those are scary women. Like all of them just have their arms are so chiseled. And like that's so rare to see in a movie because women are always cast as like demure, docile, skinny, or chubby. There's not strong. There's not a ton of strong representation. And so I think that's why the scenes on Themyscira are like my absolute favorite.
Yeah.
Because it just puts you in a world where you're like, this would be a great place to live.
Well, and I think that's the other thing that it sets up that powerful piece for women, especially because you really, like, aside from, you technically see some men in the sort of flash forward, Wayne Enterprises dropping off the photo or whatever that sets up her flashback to tell the real story of the movie. But other than that, you spend the first like 30 to 40 minutes before Trevor shows up as just women, and they're all being awesome, and they're all center stage, and they're not just randomly in the background. Like it is, and it really does allow for a thing that you don't see in movies that often, because you don't see that many women on camera without a man having conflicts and conversations. What is the Bechdel test? I think it's what it's called. Like, can two women on screen have a conversation that does not center around a man? Like, that's a feminist filmmaking thing. And it's like way more movies fail it than manage to succeed past it. So
there's actually there's a podcast about that I think it's called the Bechdel Cast, and I think I haven't listened to it, but I think that's what they do. They go into and they look at different movies and they see if it passes the Bechdel test.
That's cool. I think and also there are not a ton of conversations. Well, there's like none about man except for Zeus and Ares and all that. And then you also get to see these ladies fight. They're fighting each other. They're practicing. They're training, and it's like so freaking badass. Like I wrote down that first battle versus Antiope with Wonder Woman versus Antiope. It's just so like you can feel her desire to like win and be strong and to be trained and be ready, and it's just so freaking cool. And then when the dudes actually do come, the Germans, they are
when they all just leap right into action and like just start jumping off the cliff. It is
Yeah.
just like, I challenge you, and that's the thing is, I think men, we've had movies that make you want to like their action flicks like that. They're going like, you're a fist pump, like kick ass. Oh! And I had the same exact emotion, and then it dawns on you like, I've never seen a woman be the one who prompts that feeling from me.
Yeah.
That's wild. Yeah. But yeah, they're so strong. You're just like, this is believable because they've trained so much for this. They're swinging from cliffs. They're shield. Like, just, it's so cool. And they don't have any guns.
Yes. And I've seen this movie like probably like more than 5 times at least, if not more than that.
Awesome.
And maybe up to like 10 times, I think. But one of the things that always surprised me is when they're in that training scene and you see them doing all those tricks, the stunts on the horses. I'm like, every time I see it, it blows me away.
Yeah. And I think those are probably all trained horseback riders and stuff.
You would have to be.
That is still a real life person, a real life woman doing that thing.
Yeah, I love it. I want to be like the Amazonians.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, like the whole Themyscira thing, the mythical land stuff, Asgard, all that kind of stuff, Olympus, never really interested me, but I was totally invested. I was surprised by how much I was invested in Themyscira in that opening, especially Robin Wright. Oh my God, she fucking killed it in this role. I was so angry when she died.
I know that this is like my 4th watch or 5th. I can't remember. And I think this is the first time it hit that she's wearing the Wonder Woman crown until she dies and passes it on. I don't know why I never clocked that before, which I think is wonderful. And then
that's also, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I was gonna comment on the costume stuff, but you finish your thought first.
No, go ahead. I want to hear about the costume.
Okay, so one of the things that always kind of drove me nuts about Wonder Woman's costume was how America-centric it is, right? It's got like the eagle breastplate, or then later they changed it to the W, but it's got like the star-spangled skirt or trunks, and then she's got the star and the tiara, and I'm like, well, she's supposed to be from Greek mythology. How do these things connect? And I think they did, I got a lot of criticisms of what Zack Snyder did with the DC stuff, but one of the things I think that he did really well was the costume designs, aside from the Flash. But the design of that Wonder Woman costume is an amazing upgrade of her suit. It evokes that classic costume, but it still connects it more to the kind of Greco-Roman themes of the character.
Yeah, it feels like a gladiatorial, what you see Roman soldiers wear. Yeah.
We saw it in real life. Do you remember?
When we went to CWB out in LA. Yep.
Yeah. And it's like skimpy, but it's not unbelievable because she's like, yo, I need all of this. When she's like jumping a little bit ahead, but when she's trying on all those different outfits to be undercover and is trying to kick, and she's like, I can't move in any of these other clothes. So it's like, it makes sense why she's in this armor, but she also has to be able to jump and split and kick, and it's just, I agree. I love the outfits so much.
Yeah.
They're cool.
Well, also with the skirt thing, how it's like, I don't know what it's called, but like the greaves or the whatever it's called, but that was that's historically accurate. That's what like even the male soldiers wore back then. So it's a very good update of that. And even the star, they made some slight changes to it, so now it's not obviously like a US themed star. So it seems more like it does fit a lot better with that era that she's coming out of.
Agreed. And then there's like one last badassery move when like Wonder Woman does not hesitate. She sees Steve start to drown. There is no hesitation. She's like, BRB, let me hop off this cliff and save this man's life. And like, I think that's so establishing of like who these women are, that they are so strong, but also they're doing it with love. She like would never let a human die who was innocent. She kills a couple people later on, but
well, and yeah, with that, I think the same thing, it goes to show like her just unending compassion that she has to be dragged along when they are watching the horrors of what's happening to the innocents, right before No Man's Land. And obviously it kind of like sets up the emotional stakes, which is one of the many reasons why No Man's Land is such a good scene. But I agree with you. It's the same thing. It's like everyone, or like, you know, it like tears your heart out when later on there's that general that's just like, you know, she's like, Trevor's like, men are dying, you know, soldiers are going to die. We can save soldiers or something like that. And the general's just like, that's what soldiers are there for. And she wants to like just leap across the table. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yeah, her compassion is amazing.
Yeah. And then I do think Chris Pine is a perfect casting for this movie because it doesn't need to be a man movie, right? It's a woman-centered movie, but he is the perfect like complement to being kind of a dum-dum, but like trying really hard. He also is very passionate and compassionate, and he also his first scene where he's just like, "Oh, do you know what this is? This is my this is a watch." I can watch that scene over and over and over again.
But also when she's like, "You let that little thing tell you what to do," and I'm just like, "Oh."
It was so beautiful, so well done, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think their chemistry is part of what makes this movie too, and I think that's probably right. But also, Chris Pine's acting, like he manages to step right into, like you said, that complimentary role, and I think the writing is so well done for this movie because, and this is something I think was true of Barbie and Ken. It's like that person is they're almost sharing equal screen, and you've got a man who kind of understands this is not his movie. He doesn't need to be the center, but it also like there's space for them. Like, and maybe that's just because there's always space for men, and we live in a patriarchal society. But I think that the movie doesn't short shrift him as a character the way that many other male-led movies would short shrift the romantic interest in that movie.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, also, even though she's in the midst of all these men after she leaves Themyscira, like there's never a risk of any of them taking the spotlight from her performance. Like she is always center stage. I mean, even just visually, like just how striking her costume stands out amongst like all the drabness of the rest of it. That was such a great choice to have it stand out that much. Because when she was in Batman v Superman, yeah, she was a little bit brighter than everything else, but still, that was a very dark movie overall.
Yeah, and she does kind of blend a little more in that than she does, I think, in this because of how the movie's filmed. But I also think that casting Gal Gadot helps with that because she is just sort of objectively beautiful woman.
Yes.
And I love that, Etta, who deserves a shout out, the actress Lucy Davis, because she also just kills it. You know what I mean? As the song says, like, she understood the assignment. Like she came in and crushed that. But
like when they put glasses on her and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's going to make her less beautiful."
And I feel like that's the trail of the whole movie. Like you're saying, like you can surround her by women, but it's like the light's always going to be on her. Like it doesn't matter what you do. You can put her in spectacles. It's not making a difference.
But Gal Gadot does not ever, or Wonder Woman as a character, never takes that as like, "Oh, I am beautiful or I am strong." She's just like, "No, I'm here for a mission. I'm here for love. And I'm also just going to be honest." She's truly honest throughout the whole movie. And like going back a little bit, but I love this line where she's talking about she read all the 12 volumes of some book, and she was like, "You're not going to like it," to Steve. And he's like, "What do you mean I'm not going to like it?" And she's like, "Well, it says that men are essential for procreation, but not pleasure." And I was like, I love it. She's not wrong.
That's what I was going to say. I'm pretty sure I turned to you when we watched this, and I was like, facts. Like, that's accurate. That's accurate.
One of the things I loved about that scene, too, is that, with a movie like this, I think, and this was probably, I've never read any of the other scripts that were flying around, because this movie had been in development for a while, but I imagine most of them probably treated her as very naive when she comes into Man's World. Diana is not naive at all in this movie. Like, she is well-read. She is intelligent. There's a little bit of naivete when it comes to, like, the true nature of man, which is kind of one of the driving themes of the movie. But when it comes to, like, actual biology and, like, all these other stuff, she is very well-read. And, like she says, when he's trying to talk about all these things about, like, he's trying to dance around, the hot talk of sex. And she's just very direct. She's like, "You're talking about the pleasures of the flesh. I know. I've read up on this shit."
Yeah.
I think he's just so funny, too, when she's like, "No, I was just sculpted from clay from Zeus." And Steve goes, "Oh, that's cool." Or something like that. immediately establishes he's like, okay, yeah, that's how it is. I love it.
Now that was actually, there was a change that happened in this movie. They took a hint from, so they did the New 52 comics back in the early in 2011, and they had the sculpted from clay origin was, I think that was from George Perez in the 80s, but then in the 2011 reboot they established that her father was actually Zeus. So they completely, you know, did away with that, and they did that in this movie. They make her the daughter of Zeus. Do you guys have any thoughts about that one way or the other?
So she's still sculpted from clay out of the love of her mother, and then Zeus animated her, right?
So there's a quick line in the movie where, you know, right before she's fighting Ares and he's saying, you know, we are in fact siblings and everything, to say, you know, Zeus in fact had a child with the queen of the Amazons, and the implication there is it wasn't through magic or through clay. It was they got busy and her mother had just been lying to her.
I guess I missed that part.
But I think I like it. I think I like the idea that you incorporate both. I think that for a larger audience, especially these days, we are more familiar with the concept of Zeus and siring a lot of demigods, and so I think that's easier to swallow. And I think makes it sort of make more sense in some ways that she's as powerful as she is, I guess.
Yeah. How do the Amazon women come to creation? They were just originally from Zeus as well?
So, correct me if I'm wrong on this, Perry, but because I just read that Perez book that does establish this, and as I was watching the movie, it seems to be implying the exact same thing. There is a storyline that when Ares is basically, you know, starting to balk and say he wants, you know, not to create men or whatever, one of the other Greek goddesses comes to Zeus and the council and is saying, like, we should create this new race of people, specifically female, to lead man and to show them like what they should be doing, what like their greater connection is to the world, and to not be fighting and not be deadly. And therefore it is this like reincarnation of former women who had lived, and their souls, like that Gaia, the first, you know, mother goddess, was protecting, and then they like these goddesses come around and decide to birth they call them the midwives. They refer to themselves as the midwives, birthing these reborn women who had been killed by men in the past. And then they become the Amazons, and they all just sort of like then fall to the earth and come out of the water. And that's kind of exactly what's depicted in the movie. So
yeah, I never read that Perez book, so you are the authority on this one in this room here.
Yeah, but read one comic, awesome.
Yes, my take on what they had said was just what they said in the movie, right? Zeus created the Amazons to be like the guardians of men, or something along those lines. So I don't know exactly how he created them or where they kind of came from. So I think all of that is just kind of left up to interpretation.
Yeah. I think the thing that stuck out to me is that what their purpose was.
Which is love.
Love and guidance of man. Like their whole point was they were supposed to come to Earth to, like, they were like, basically they looked around and they're like, oh, man be fucking up. Let's send this force to them to then help them get back on the right path. Was the Amazon's original purpose.
And it's the opposite of Ares, who was just like, man is bad, so let's not do anything about it and just get rid of man.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, in the original comics, Diana came out in World War II, and I think a big reason why they changed it to World War I was because this is shortly after Captain America: First Avenger came out. They didn't want to be seen as kind of like copying that, so they switched it to World War I instead. What do you guys think about how they used World War I in this instead of World War II, or instead of just setting it in the modern day?
I like that it's set in a war that, like, okay, sometimes I'm a little naive myself. We tell this story all the time. Nick was watching The Martian, and I was like, wait, is this based on a real story? And there's a couple times when we were watching this last night, I was like, wait, is this based on a real story? Like, did Wonder Woman help us save the war?
Oh my goodness.
But I think that's a great part of it, because it makes it really believable of, like, obviously the idea that love should conquer all, and that man really is flawed.
Yeah, and actually, yeah, I do have some thoughts because I had some notes on this. For one thing, there are a lot of similarities between this movie and Captain America: The First Avenger. The whole
With the
plane at the
yeah.
end and sacrificing yourself. It was a good thing they made that choice. I also think that it fits really well because before World War I had happened, nothing like that had ever occurred. And it was like we had created deadly machines, but we had never created anything that was sort of weapons of mass destruction and weapons of mass violence until World War I. There's a reason like people still talk sometimes about in history classes, mustard gas and things like that. And the reason that that's sort of an upscaled mustard gas is the storyline of this, because like we had never figured out a way to kill each other on such a massive scale. And it gets said a couple times. People thought when this war happened that surely once we finally get through this, it was so horrific, we will never do this again to each other. And I had a note about like, it's so depressing.
So much for that.
That we didn't do that at all. We didn't learn that lesson. We very quickly had World War II, relatively speaking, and have basically just been killing each other nonstop with even more advanced weaponry ever since. And so to me, World War I is kind of that turn where it is when the balance shifted in that direction. And so that makes me think it's perfect. I also think, obviously, for lots of reasons, I wrote down that I think that the sequence for sort of, especially the like a couple of minutes leading into, and then like maybe a little bit into the battle in the village afterwards, that no man's land sequence may be the best sequence put to film in this current century of anything. Because I was talking about like, and I took some notes even, the music is done so well to set it up. Like I said, they show you the horrors that she's experiencing and this like strife and the compassion, and people are saying, no, there's nothing you can do. You must continue. You must continue. The one-liner that like is implied, but I don't think anyone ever actually says, they say that's no man's land. It means no man can go there. And there's the opportunity where she could have been like, no man can, or but a woman
right, like
can.
In Return of the King.
Yes, yeah, precisely. But instead of doing that, which is another amazing choice too by the writers and filmmakers, like, no, we're not going to do that because you're smart enough to get that's the point of this scene. And then, she sets up, I think the VFX hold up. I think that it's like so emotionally stirring. And I just love then that it leads into her first big battle with that musical sting that is also an amazing piece of musical writing. But I think all of that is so beautiful. And that's another reason why I think World War I was a good choice, because it literally couldn't happen. There were no, there weren't the same kinds of trenches in future wars.
I also think the whole point of this is Diana thinks or knows that Ares is the god of war, and war is going to be the end of the world. And then when Steve says, what do you mean, what war? It's the war, because there had never been a war before. I think it makes complete sense that she's like, now's the time. Now is when I have to find Ares and kill him. So, and Perry, you asked about setting it in the modern world. The second movie, which we said we weren't going to talk about, was close to it. Set in the 80s. And man, that was bad. It was just so
bad. Yeah, it was bad. We did an episode on it back when it premiered on HBO Max, and it was such an unbelievable downgrade, especially considering that you have all the same people involved. And I don't know what the fuck happened.
Me neither. So I like to remove it from my brain. I will never watch it again because it doesn't exist to me. This is Wonder Woman.
I'm preparing to do like pretty soon. I'm going to be recording a DCEU ranking episode with.
Okay.
And cool. So I've been like, kind of like rewatching bits and pieces here and there, and like I was thinking like, because I haven't seen 1984 since that first viewing, and I'm like, do I want to watch it again? I think I'll just listen to the podcast we did instead.
Just go ahead and put it in the bottom. Know that it needs to be there. There's literally no the other movies, unfortunately, that were worse. So.
But yeah, on the World War I thing, like when I first heard that it was set in World War I, my first reaction is like, oh, they're just trying to avoid the Captain America comparisons. And I'm like, I didn't really. But then when I saw the movie, I'm just like, oh wait, this actually makes a lot of sense, right? Because World War II, there was good reason to fight World War II, right? Like we were fighting fascism. There was a good reason for the world to come together and fight against that. I don't know how much you guys know about World War I, but my God, it was a fucking mess. It was just like there's a famous internet meme called "If World War I was a bar fight," and it is just judging by your face, Danny, I'm guessing you haven't seen this, but you got to look it up after we're done because it is hilarious and it perfectly shows like how chaotic and just fucking stupid World War I was.
Yeah. And that's what they kept saying in the movie is like millions are going to die senselessly. And they're just continuing to let it happen. And she was like, why are we not stopping it? Why are we not getting the treaty? But, you know, the answer to that is Ares. He kept pushing it out. He said, we don't want to get the armistice. That was called armistice. The treaty. But that's what makes Diana so mad. She's like, why are we killing these people for no reason? And then you add the women and children. And that's when she was like, nope. It's over for you bitches.
I also liked how they sidestepped the whole English is the universal language thing when she says, she's like, we speak hundreds of languages on Themyscira. I'm like, oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah, there's only one scene in the movie where it didn't make sense is when Steve is trying to get into the gala and he has the little guy who's an actor as his driver and they are speaking in English. I'm like, they would be speaking German if this was to be believable, but
yeah, and they could have done it like, and my suspicion is just that, I don't know, there must have been a choice on the day. Chris Pine couldn't speak German, or he decided for him to just do a German accent, which to me, it's like, it's actually worse with you doing a ridiculous German accent in terms of believability, because either you're going to tell me that you're just speaking German, but you're going to be speaking English, and I'll just imagine you're speaking German, or not, but you doing a I'm like,
the invitation.
Yeah, it was like, okay, comedic, and that's it.
And you know, going back to the No Man's Land sequence, one of the other things I really love about it is how they hide her outfit until that moment. Right? That was another really smart choice because you get like the little hints of it, like when she comes to Steve and he's like, "Oh, nice outfit," but it's not until that moment when she takes it off and it's just like this burst of color. I liken it a lot to, you'd mentioned Christopher Reeve before, but that first night in, which is kind of undone because you get a shot of it from the distance after the Jor-El instruction scene. But the fact that is the first time we see that costume and it's just this explosion of color in the midst of all this gray was an amazing choice.
And also, all the women listening will get this. When you take your hair down and you flip it out, you mean business. And that she took her hair down first, then climbed out, then took her coat off. It was like, let's go. It was just so good. I love it so much.
Something I noted this time that I think was happening, and you kind of mentioned it, like you didn't realize that the star that she puts on, the tiara that she wears, is belonging to TIP.
Yeah.
Well, that's what she's doing when she's like putting her hair down. She's actually putting that on.
Oh, yeah, because you're right. She didn't have that on before.
But similarly is like her being like, no, this is, you know, I'm gonna sort of channel my dead general, my aunt, and I just think that's another emotional beat that's added to it, and perfect scene.
Yeah, well, I mean that's a good thing because I think one of the things that has happened in the comics is I think they've leaned a little bit too far into Diana as warrior, forgetting the whole part about how she's supposed to be an ambassador of peace, and I think this movie and Godot in particular do a good job of straddling that line between warrior and peace ambassador, right? Because up until that point in No Man's Land, she is very much in like the peace ambassador mode, right? She's all about peace and love and all that, very much, you know, obviously influenced by her mother. But then when she puts on that tiara, it's like, okay, now I'm channeling Antioch. And it was this seamless transition, right? There's you don't feel any contradiction between those two parts of her.
Chef's kiss.
I agree. And she like barely kills anyone until she is truly like, this is the enemy, this is bad. And I think like the most gruesome killing is when she thinks that she's killed Ares, but it's actually just Ludendorff on steroids. But yeah, throughout most of the movie, she's like blocking people, moving people, but she doesn't go out of her way to kill people, which I think is just like, they never even mention it, but it's just subtle, like, no, she still wants peace, but she just wants this violence to stop.
Yeah.
And then,
well, I mean, the fact that she's restraining people with the lasso in that scene of the town, I think that was a perfect illustration of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, we haven't talked about the crew that she puts or Steve puts together. The little actor guy, Chief,
Mhm.
and what's the other
The
guy's name?
Scottish
So
Charlie.
Samir, Charlie, and Chief.
Yeah. And when she stops the violence in the bar, and
And
Samir goes, I am both frightened and aroused.
such a good line. Such a good line.
Because that was like truly odd. Like if you saw that happening in a bar,
Oh yeah.
same. That woman is so beautiful.
Yeah, what did
Yeah,
you
I
guys
thought
think
it
of the crew overall?
Charlie confuses me. Does he ever make a shot?
That's a good question. I thought he did. but
I
maybe
feel
not.
like I want to say he did, but I'm honestly can't remember.
I can't remember either.
I like that. Like that you see the characters have compassion for him, even though it's like you could easily be like, really frustrated with him. It's like you're literally being brought along because you're a marksman, but then you can't like take the shot because of the trauma that you've been through. But they're kind of like, but that's still our bud. Like we're not gonna leave behind because of that.
Yeah. I like that Samir says everyone is fighting their own battles, Diana. And I think that gives her like insight into man because she's never had to deal with like emotional like trauma or anything like that. She's only known one thing, which is these perfect, beautiful women who can fight. And so she goes into the real world and is realizing like he just wants to be an actor. But he's like, the color of my skin has held me back. And it's just something that has probably never dawned on her before. And just realizing that like that crew emphasizes that men are flawed. And not men like just men. Man is flawed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And at first she was like, well, they have to deserve me or they have to deserve peace. And at the end, she realizes that you have to choose to love them despite their flaws. So I think they really do add on to the message of the movie. And they also step back. They're like, where's Diana? We need her. We need her. Like they understand she is the one. She is the most powerful. And they never make a comment or try to like overstep or do anything.
Yeah, I don't even think I thought of that, but as you bring it up, I'm like, yeah, if this movie had been made, 10 years earlier or by a different studio or something like that, or something at the time, I think there would have been a lot more comments of like, oh man, I can't believe we're following a woman, like just those little side beats that are like played for comedy, but really would have been undermining her as a character. Yeah.
Also, speaking of I didn't know this, but I just read this now. So Eugene Braverock played Chief, and he was really concerned about the possible stereotypes in the representation. So he brought these concerns to Patty Jenkins, and even like he wasn't really keen on the character just being called Chief. And Jenkins said, "Okay, well, tell us what we should change." And he had like this unprecedented level of creative control over how his character was portrayed in the film. He said he had never had that experience before on a set.
That's cool.
That is really good to hear. And it is, I would say, like, he falls into some of the tropes because I think of how he's written, but it doesn't surprise me to hear that story because it sounds like, okay, somebody who's not a native individual wrote it, but then he was putting his spin on it to make it like still have some of that spirit of it. And I think that they're an interesting tale of like how a person copes with the ups and downs of life, because as you said, Danielle, I think that the takeaway message of this movie ultimately is like you just have to choose love. Nobody's deserving it. Every human being is flawed. We have both good and bad capabilities in us, but you just have to choose to have love and compassion, and the more you choose love and compassion for others, the better it makes the world as a whole. If you keep focusing on does this person deserve it, the reality is, and maybe this is my own religious beliefs, but no one does. No one deserves the love that they should get. But the only way to kind of bring them up to deserving it is to give them the love that they don't deserve, in my humble opinion. But I think that these three characters also play a role in showing different ways that people can cope with life. So you kind of have Samir, who is, in my opinion, because they talk about him being an actor, he's jumping at every chance to sort of play a role. Like I was thinking about in The Village in the evening when he's kind of pretending for just a moment to be their, servant. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, well, in some ways you could look at this as he's pretending to be a servant that's kind of like insensitive. It's kind of like belittling his character. But if you think about it from what he has said, he chooses any option he can to pretend to be someone else for any period of time. he leaps at, let me be your driver, let me be your driver. Like, he just
Mhm.
wants a chance, and that's how he copes, to pretend like he's someone else. Then you've got Charlie, who's like not dealing with it well. Occasionally he lets himself, cry and sing or whatever, but like mostly it is just he is suffering in his trauma. And then you've got Chief, who's just sort of like seems to be at peace with what the world is. That beautiful scene where he's talking about like, I got nowhere else to be. Like, what else am I supposed to do? At least here I'm free. At least here I get to make my choices. Anyone could die tomorrow, but I could be dying tomorrow anywhere. And, then he says something like, all of my people, have been destroyed basically. And she's like, well, who did that? And he's like, his people. And he's literally gesturing to like one of his best friends. You know what I mean? And he's just like, but I recognize that's not him personally. That is just like, that's the truth. That's the facts of the world, so I think they provide that viewpoint if you want to look at the subtext.
Agreed.
Yeah, well said. Also, how good is that scene when they're in London? And well, first, I love the fact that when they come into London, he's like, oh, we're here in London, and she looks up and she's like, this is fucking disgusting.
Idiots.
He goes, yeah, it's not for everybody.
But I mean, like, I love that scene because it was the reality at that time. London back in the early 1900s was a shithole.
Yes.
But also that scene that echoes the scene in Superman the movie. Like, you can tell there's so much of Superman the movie's DNA in this. But when, they're ambushed by the German spies and she deflects the bullets instead, like, that was I love that scene.
What's funny is the first time I saw this movie, I had not watched the original Superman. And so now, after having watched it last night, I was like, oh, this is the same scene as in Superman. And it's just like brilliant. And I didn't have to know it to love the movie, but it just adds that extra little layer of like, she is also Superman.
Yeah.
She is the Superman. Yeah. The one thing I think when I was thinking about this movie and I was like, did she need to be in love with Steve Trevor? Or like, did they need to have the kiss and the
Night of Passion together?
They did it, I think. And I said, I'll allow it because they were celebrating such a big victory. Like, she had just saved that whole town and she was just feeling super great and he had helped her. And he showed in that battle scene how much he understood her by not being like, I got this, get out of the way. He's like, no, you guys pick up this piece of metal, put it on our back. We're going to support her. And, like, if I were a woman, I'd be like, damn, I love you too, because I'm in charge. And then obviously it adds to the end how heartbreaking it is that he's like, all right, well, got to go sacrifice myself for today.
Well, another thing I liked about one of the reasons I especially like the fact that they had that sex scene and it happened so early is that they don't go into the route that I think a lot of movies do, where it's either a woman is either a virgin or a whore, right? There's no in between. So it's just like, yep, she's going to have sex. She's going to enjoy it. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I thought that's how I looked at that scene.
Yeah. And it's not her being taken advantage of. It's her choice. Right. And it's not, to get something. It's like you said, it's just celebrating life. And I think, it's another one of those be in the moment kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely. Because tomorrow was not guaranteed.
Yeah.
For Steve. R.I.P.
Something else too I noticed about this, and after I watched this and then watched the theatrical cut of Justice League, there was something that was really unsettling about the way that Gal Gadot was photographed in Justice League compared. And I'm like, why am I not liking this? There's something that feels off. And I rewatched Wonder Woman, and I'm like, oh my god, I understand what they mean by the male gaze now, because I didn't quite understand it before. But after comparing how Gadot is filmed in Wonder Woman, how she is in Justice League, there's like a lot of low angle shots in Justice League that border on upskirt shots.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Which they could have easily had one of those for No Man's Land, but again, they show her and they do like straight on. You just see her walking out of frame. They don't follow her because otherwise you would have an upskirt shot, but they're like, no, we don't want to belittle this moment. Yeah. Versus lots of,
That's so interesting. I would watch those scenes in the movie just to see the difference. But I think it's like, and maybe that's why women feel so much more compelled to watch this movie or see themselves in this movie, because we're seeing it from the woman's perspective, just like Patty was like, this is what I see. I see a strong woman, not a sexy woman.
Yeah, and I think that's the key too, is because those are the types of things that only film nerds like you and me, I think, Perry, notice the like detail of how that happens. For the average moviegoer, it's just this thing that's happening on a subconscious level. And even for you described like you had to give it thought. Like at first you're just like, I don't know why, but this is not sitting well with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as much as I love this movie, though, I've got this has a huge third act problem. Like the third act is just.
I agree. I hate the ending. I hate it. And Ares sucks.
This is where it becomes like all the other times I appear on Perry's podcast, where I'm like, there's just so much good that could have been done, and then they just made the wrong choices.
I literally put, this movie is perfect except for when the real Ares comes out. Like, that just really, the ending is lit.
I mean, to me, it completely belittled the whole theme of the movie, that man is destructive and man wants to destroy himself. And then when you come in Ares and they try to say like, oh no, it's still man doing it. Ares just like, well, I just kind of nudged him a little bit. I'm like, no, you should have just been like, if you want to have Ares at the end, fine. But he should be like, I was just sitting back and watching this all happen. I had nothing to do with any of this.
Yeah. Like it isn't like, he's like, I just whispered in their ears when he's explaining that part. I'm like, yeah, that's the flawed man who's just taking this. But then he's like, JK, I'm going to suck up all this metal and turn into the devil, but also still have this awful mustache. And like, I hate it.
I love David Thewlis as an actor, David Thewlis, but he was not the right choice if you wanted to have his face. And I don't know if it was his choice to be like, you must have my face. I think if they were, there didn't need to be a CGI slugfest at all. There's this like weird belief that there does need to be. Didn't need to be there at all. If you were gonna choose to do it, make it shorter, because that's the only part of this movie that starts to feel long, because it's like 30 minutes unnecessarily. And C, if you're gonna have him turn into this huge CGI creature, then have him go full bore CGI creature and turn him into what Ares is in the comics, where it's like underneath the helmet is just black and you see two red eyes staring at you. Like just have him do that, and then when he comes out of the smoke, David Thewlis' face is gone.
No ginger mustache.
He is just Ares, menacing force.
Especially like that mustache, it distracted me so much when I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? Just don't do this. Oh, that was so bad.
When she knocks his helmet off, and you like just obviously like David Thewlis' head just does not fit on the CGI body that they have.
Yeah, or they do the flashback of like when I was younger, and it's like a super jacked body, and then still him with his creepy little mustache. I'm like, no.
He's a god. Why not just like these gods? They have the ability to transform into different people. Why not just get some like super jacked guy to play the Ares part? And like you could have David Thewlis then voicing it or whatever. But yeah, that was just so unnecessary.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it does. When we were rewatching it last night, I was like, man, I love this movie. Man, I love this movie. Man, oh yeah. This is why I don't watch it all the time, because of the ending. And there are still parts of the ending that are beautiful, which is like her getting kind of, she can't hear, and then Steve comes up and is like, you can save, or I can save today, you can save the world. And you don't find that out till later. Like, that is beautiful. Her not murdering the masked woman, Dr. Poison.
Dr. Poison,
like, that's also really, really great.
Because it's her choosing love, and it's her having that moment of remembering.
And also she's like, lady, get out of here. But yeah, all the other Ares stuff, I'm like,
yeah, the Ares stuff, I mean, I think you're agreeing with us. It just detracts, like you said, from the stuff that is beautiful. It makes the movie longer than it needs to be, and it detracts from the message of man is flawed. You have to choose not to fight, and that's what she does with Lady Death or whatever, Lady Poison, Dr. Poison.
Dr. Poison, yeah.
Because
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just the line that Danielle mentioned, I turned to her and I've told her this story before. Part of the reason this movie stood out to me personally, so this is getting a little bit of what we talk about on our podcast with personal shit. So the ways that we cope with stress is Danielle is sort of a just constantly anxious person, and every single day. I don't tend to feel that most days. And then occasionally my depression will take hold and I am like catastrophically in the red and very much not in a good place. When I first saw this movie, even as far back as 2017, we had reached a pattern where she sort of would save me and pull me out of my dark spaces when I hit there. But it was like infrequent. Versus me, I was sort of taking care of her and her general anxiety every single day. So when that line happens where he says, I can save today, and see, I'm getting like emotional just saying it. When I can save today, but you can save the world. That truly is a big part of why this movie identified for me in our relationship, is that Danielle is my Wonder Woman in that sense, that I'm able to save the day every day. I could save this day. You're the one who pulls me back from the brink and like saves all of the world. So it means a lot to me too.
You guys are going to make me cry.
I know. Can you get that in a clip and then put in a button and then...
I was way too verbose. Sorry, talked too long.
What I was going to say too is like, I've been working out my rankings for this ranking episode we're going to be doing. And when I was thinking about like, if not for that third act, this would be number 1 in my DC EU rankings with a bullet. But because of that third act, it actually falls down to number 3.
Oh,
dang, Aries!
I gotta know. What are you willing to spoil? What the 2 above it are?
The 2 above it are the Suicide Squad is number 1 and Aquaman is number 2.
Oh wow.
Okay.
I've never seen Aquaman.
I politely disagree with you on your number 2, but to each their own opinion.
Well, because I think Aquaman is. I think overall, I would say Wonder Woman. Again, it's the third act problem. Like, if not for that third act, Wonder Woman would unquestionably be the better movie. Whereas Aquaman is consistent all throughout. Wonder Woman takes a massive nosedive in that third act, and that's what knocked it down.
Damn, that stinks. So if we're repitching the third act of this, does real Ares show himself?
I think I'd be okay with him showing himself, but just like being just kind of like as a bystander. Like I didn't do any of this shit. I'm just sitting here with a bucket of popcorn and watching. And then you cut to David Thewlis with like just popcorn butter all over his mustache.
I do actually think that could work, and you could keep it David Thewlis and still have the like surprise. Because I was thinking you could just make it. I mean, it's a little hollow if she defeats Ares, but I think you could do it where Ludendorff or whatever is Ares, because it feels like they did a really good job making him the red herring. Ludendorff, thank you. They set it up that it makes a lot of sense. He seems like a mustache twirling villain. You've got the whole weird where she's talking about him being weak and then gives him that vapor to smoke, and it kind of implies like, well, maybe it's Ares who's like needing that extra special sauce because he's a weakened god, whatever. I think you could have done that and had him just be Ares and have her kill him, and then still have it be like her taking that moment where she's like, I killed Ares. Why aren't people stopping? And instead of David Thewlis showing up again at all to be like, oh, you didn't really kill Ares, have it be, she did kill Ares. And yet you still have the flawed humanity that they are not stopping, because that's the kind of, like you said, Perry, it cheapens it when they make some of the choices. You go away from the idea that like, no, you need to know man is flawed. We have good and bad in us. And that message is still there without Ares being there.
Is there a comic book of Wonder Woman where it ends this way? Like, was this going off of a book? Or did they make it?
I'm not familiar with most of Wonder Woman's comics, but I don't think so. I think they just took like bits and pieces of her origin story from like the George Perez run, from the Brian Azzarello run, and then they just kind of weave this World War I story to fill in they have the origin story comes from those comics. The Steve Trevor coming to Themyscira, her deciding to go back with him to stop the war or whatever. In this case, it's World War I instead of World War II. But outside of that, I think everything else is just original to this movie.
I think you're right. Yeah, that's my impression too.
Yeah. Well, Patty Jenkins should have. Well, she just directed it. She didn't write it.
She might have co-written it.
Anyways, whoever needed to do some edits.
I'm seeing the writing credits it's Zack Snyder, Alan Heinberg, and Jason Fuchs. But I imagine there was probably some Patty Jenkins probably did some like uncredited rewrites or something like that, because that usually happens, right? Because the way the Writers Guild rules work, like you have to contribute like a certain portion of the screenplay or something like that to have actual credit on the screenplay or something along those lines.
Interesting. Yeah, then maybe this is like a...
Oh yeah, here, it does say Alan Heinberg's work had to be finished and rewritten by Jenkins and Jeff Johns after he left to work on a TV show. So they did like uncredited rewrites on this.
Interesting. I was going to say Zack Snyder is the what's his name? Paul Feig? Nope.
Kevin Feige is who you're thinking
Kevin
of.
Feige, not Paul Feig, of DCEU, right?
Of the
Early on, yeah.
Of this time, yeah, he would have been.
And so maybe he was the one who was like, well, it still has to have that big cinematic
I could see
ending.
that.
And so I feel like Patty Jenkins was like, okay, I'll control the first 2 pieces of this, and then we'll still give audiences what they think they came for.
Yeah.
And have fighty, killy.
I think by this point, Snyder was probably gone from it, but the basic outline that because it said it was the story came up by Heinberg, Snyder, and Fuchs. So I think that means like he just kind of came up with like the plot outline. I don't think he actually had any writing on the actual script, and it looks like Alan Heinberg actually wrote the screenplay itself, and then Jenkins and Johns rewrote the screenplay parts of it.
That tracks.
Well, do better next time, guys.
Another problem I have with 1984 is just the implication here that, Diana has become, and I think this falls into like cliche territory where she is so obsessed with the idea of losing Steve Trevor that she just shuts herself off from the rest of the world. I feel like that is a very un-Diana thing for her to do.
I agree.
Yeah, this movie ends with her looking back post 84 and just being like, that was a great time in my life. I believed in love. I still believe in love, and that's because of this moment. But it doesn't seem like she's angered or like shut off because of it. So it's weird to like then go back and be like, but in the 80s, she also is a hermit. Or I can't even remember the story of that.
And also for her to like be so active as a hero, and that then nobody sees a superhero until Superman is. So it's just like it's completely out of place with the rest of the continuity of that universe, which, I know we're supposed to look at, especially now that it's over, look at these movies in isolation, but it's so maddening what they did to her character and how 84 felt like a backtrack in so many ways.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed. I don't like that movie at all.
Especially because I don't get why you call a movie 1984 and it has absolutely nothing to do with the book. 1984 is such a big shorthand for like totalitarian government and all this kind of stuff, and instead it's just like, nah, it's just a 80s movie. This doesn't make any sense.
Wanted to use a mall and big hair and
they could have gone 85, 83, but I think that they like knew that 84, because of that book, is kind of like more in the zeitgeist, that it just therefore sort of felt like it came off the tongue easier. And it's like, I agree with you though. It's like you're hitting notes that you're not actually hitting.
Yeah. And the movie, I can't remember the movie at all really, but like I know Steve Trevor comes back, and to me that also like cheapens this movie of like he has a hero's ending. Leave it at that. Like let her remember him fondly in love rather than whatever crap happens in the 80s.
Yeah.
It's also really creepy because he is in someone else's body the whole time.
Yeah. Somebody else, I remember at the time people were critiquing it and talking about how like, do you all realize that this is effectively rape? Like you're just having a hero commit that. It's like, that's not a great idea.
Yeah. So this first Wonder Woman, near perfection. Overall, I love it so much. I would change the third act, but I can't. But I would watch it over and over again.
Agreed.
Which is shocking for me for a superhero movie, right?
She renews her vows.
That's a perfect note to end on. Nick, unless you have any other final thoughts, anything to add to that?
Nope. My last notes were just more details on the thing I went into about her line and my relationship.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I love this movie except for the end. I mean, usually when I rewatch this movie, I think I just kind of like once it gets to that third act, I'm just kind of like, I think I'm done now.
Yeah. We both zoned out because last night we were like, wait, how did Ares die? Wait,
yeah, I literally like as we're getting ready to bed, I was like, can you remind me how he actually got defeated? Because I just didn't notice that.
Because we both went into our phones at that point.
All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Danny. Thank you from saving me from Nick forcing me to watch another bad movie.
Oh, don't worry, I'll be back with a vengeance. I'll find the worst.
Is there another Duck 2 with Harold the Duck 2? But thank you for having me on and letting me woman-splain some things.
I loved it. You got to come on more often so that we can have more of this, and we can hold Nick off from making me watch bad movies.
Great. I'll keep them in check.
Yes.
I love this idea. I mean, if you're saying yes, I'll show you Perry's list. We will pick something, and I will happily come talk to you again.
I'll take a look.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so guys, why don't you tell people where they can find you?
Okay, you can find me at DannyMiami4 on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. I'm not going to physically be active for a minute. I've got some other things going on. And then you can follow our podcast at N Love with Movies.
That's at the letter N, Love with Movies, all spelled out.
Mm-hmm. Where else, Nick?
That is on pretty much all the socials at this point. We're more active on some than others, but like that Blue Sky, that's all the things. We have it there. And then you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Nick Loves Movies. That's NICLUV Love, Nick Loves Movies. But yeah, other than that, if you're hearing this in our feed, because we're going to do this as a crossover episode, Perry was kind enough to help us out there when it comes to baby birthing. So if you're hearing this in our feed, go find Perry's feed, as we will link to it, and go listen to some more of his episodes. If you're listening to this in Perry's feed, go start with maybe Perry's episode on our podcast. See if you like what we talk about there, and then listen to some others around it as well.
What movie did we watch?
High Fidelity.
Oh, yes. I knew that.
Which gave Danny a bad impression of me before we even met.
Who is this guy?
And we have since then watched other John Cusack 1980s movies. So, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely check that out. The High Fidelity episode was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing that. And, as for us, superherocinephiles.com is the website. Super Cinema Pod on Threads and Instagram and Blue Sky. And also, I've got a comic book that just came out, Paragons of Earth. By the time you're listening to this, we might be doing a Kickstarter to try and raise some extra funds. The crowdfunder had finished. So I don't actually know what the link is right now, but it will be in the show notes when it is ready. So please check that out. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye. In love with movies. Da-da-da. We did it!